You weren't supposed to stay in France. 3 weeks. That was the plan. A work contract in Lyon, a hotel near the river, instant coffee every morning and bad French at the boulangerie downstairs. You were a foreigner with a return ticket and absolutely no intention of falling in love. Then you walked into the wrong café on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. She was sitting by the window, dark hair, one hand wrapped around a coffee, a book open on the table, no title on the spine. She wasn't looking at her phone, wasn't looking at anyone. She was just still, the kind of still that made everyone around her seem nervous by comparison. You sat 2 tables away. She glanced at you once. You ordered in broken French. The waiter corrected your pronunciation. She smiled. Not at you, at her book, like she was politely pretending not to notice. You stayed for 2 hours. You didn't speak to her. You came back the next day, and the day after that. On the 4th day, she looked up when you walked in and said, in perfect English, without you saying a word, "The seat across from me is free." Her name was Elise Marchand. She was Lyonnaise, born there, raised there. She knew every street, every hidden courtyard, every bouchon that didn't exist on any tourist map. She ordered your food for you the first time you ate together, because your French was, in her words, charming but dangerous. She laughed easily, asked real questions, looked at you, the way people usually only look at things they've decided matter. Your 3 weeks became 5, then 8. You called your boss from a park bench on the Rhone and renegotiated your contract remotely. You moved out of the hotel and into a sublet near Croix-Rousse. You bought a French dictionary, not a translation app, an actual dictionary, because Elise said you'd never really learn it otherwise. 6 months later, you proposed on a bridge in the rain. She said yes before you finished the sentence. Your friends called it insane. Your mother said you barely knew her, that France wasn't real life, that you were caught up in the romance of the thing. You told her she was wrong. You believed that completely. You were wrong. You got married in October, a small chapel outside Lyon. Stone walls and old light. Her side of the church had an aunt, 2 cousins she didn't seem particularly close to, and an older man, tall, grey at the temples, dark coat, who sat in the back row and left before the reception without speaking to anyone. You asked Elise who he was. A family friend, she said. He doesn't like crowds. You nodded. You moved on. The reception was warm. Your mother danced. Your best friend gave a speech that made Elise laugh out loud. Real laughter, the kind she didn't perform. You thought, this is right, and made the right call. You moved to Paris after the honeymoon. Her choice. She had work there, she said, though you'd never been entirely clear on what that work was. Consulting, she called it. For whom? Different clients. It changes. The apartment was in the 11th. Narrow staircase, high ceilings, heavy front door with 2 locks. One standard, one older, thick iron. A key you'd never been given. I'll get you a copy cut, she said. She never did. The first night it happened, you assumed a simple explanation. 2:17 a.m. You rolled over and reached for her out of instinct, that half-asleep reflex of a new husband. Empty pillow, cold sheet, bathroom. That's what you thought. You waited. You counted the seconds without meaning to. 3 minutes, 5, 7. You got up. The bathroom was dark. The kitchen was empty. Her coat was gone from the hook by the door. You stood in the hallway of your Paris apartment, in your socks, in the dark, genuinely confused. You texted her. Hey, where are you? You watched the message sit there, delivered, then read. No reply. You went to the window, looked down at the street. Wet cobblestones. A single car moving slowly. No Elise. You waited on the couch until 4 a.m, and then your body gave up and you slept. When you woke up at 7, she was in bed beside you. Hair slightly damp, skin cold. Elise, she opened one eye. Where did you go last night? A pause. Not long, maybe 2 seconds. But you'd notice that pause later, when you replayed it. I couldn't sleep. I walked. I do this sometimes when my mind won't stop. You didn't answer my text. I didn't want to wake you by looking at my phone. I'm sorry. She reached up and put her hand on the side of your face. Go back to sleep, she said. You're tired. You were tired. So you did. It happened again 4 nights later, then twice the following week. You started paying attention the way you pay attention to something when you don't want to admit you're paying attention, casually, sideways. You checked the clock when she was next to you at midnight and again at 3 a.m. to track whether she was there. You noticed the coat hook. You started sleeping lighter. The pattern was always the same, between 1 and 3 a.m., gone for 2 hours, sometimes 3, back before the city woke up. You told yourself the things people tell themselves. She's anxious. She needs space. This is just how she is. You knew she was independent. You knew she was private. This is you failing to understand her. But one thing kept pulling at the back of your mind like a loose thread. She never smelled like a bar, never smelled like a cigarette, like food, like another person. She smelled like cold air and something else you couldn't name. Faint, metallic, like the inside of an old building. You started staying awake deliberately. You set a silent alarm for 12:45 a.m., 3 nights in a row. The first night, she was still there when it went off. The second night, she was gone. You hadn't heard the door. The third night, you were watching the door when the alarm went off and you still didn't see it open. But by 1:30, she was gone. You got up and checked every lock. The front door was secured from the inside, both locks, including the old iron one, the one you'd never had a key for. You tried to talk to her about it, properly, directly, as a husband talking to his wife. She listened. She nodded. She didn't get defensive. She explained slowly that she had struggled with insomnia since she was a teenager, that walking at night was something she'd done for years, that she hadn't told you because she didn't want you to worry, that she was sorry it was bothering you. Everything she said was reasonable. Nothing she said felt true. You started looking at her differently, not with suspicion exactly, with attention. You noticed things you dismissed before, how she sometimes paused before answering simple questions, how she kept her phone face down, always, how she had friends she mentioned by first name but you'd never met, never seen in photos, never spoken to, how there were whole years of her life she'd only ever described in the vaguest possible terms. You were a foreigner in her country. You'd always assumed the gaps were cultural, things that got lost in translation. The French are private. Elise is private. That's just who she is. You stopped assuming that. The honeymoon had been in Provence, a rented stone house near a village so small it didn't have a proper name, just a number on a regional road map. Fields of dead lavender, cold mornings, beautiful in the way old abandoned things are beautiful. She'd disappeared twice that week too. You'd been so jet-lagged, so deep in the new husband haze you'd barely registered it. But you remembered now that on the third night you'd woken and gone looking for her. You'd gone outside and you'd seen her, down the hill, at the edge of the olive trees, standing completely still in the dark, not walking, not on her phone, just standing. You'd called her name. She'd turned around and come back, arm through yours, easy as anything. I was looking at the stars. You'd believed it, standing in your Paris apartment now, wide awake at 3 a.m. with the door locked from the inside. You thought about that moment differently. She hadn't been looking at the stars. She'd been waiting for something, or for someone. You followed her for the first time on a Saturday in March. You'd been planning it for a week. You slept fully dressed that night. Jeans, shoes loosely laced. You kept your phone on silent with the screen face down. You breathed slowly and waited. 1:08 a.m. She moved. You heard nothing, no creak, no rustle, but something changed in the room, and you knew she was up. You kept your eyes closed, counted to 60 after you heard the front door. Then you went. She was half a block ahead, moving quickly, hands in her coat pockets, not looking back. You kept your distance. You'd lived in this city long enough now to know which streets echoed and which ones swallowed sound. You stayed on the soft side of the pavement. She took the metro, Line 5, south. You got in a different car, watched her through the glass in the door, between carriages. She got off at Place d'Italie, walked for 12 minutes, turned onto a street you didn't know, then into a courtyard, then through a door that opened before she knocked. You stood outside. You waited 40 minutes. The door didn't open again. You went home. She was back by 4 a.m. You were pretending to sleep when she got into bed. She lay there for a while. Then quietly, in the dark, she said, "You weren't following me tonight, were you?" You said nothing. "Good," she said. "It's not time yet." You lay there for 3 hours with your heart going at twice its normal speed. She told you herself in the end. Not everything, not all at once. But she opened the door, just a crack, and she watched to see what you'd do with it. A Sunday morning, coffee at the kitchen table. She put a small card down in front of you, an address, a time, 11 p.m. "Come with me tonight," she said. You asked where. "To meet people I trust." You asked what kind of people. She looked at you for a long moment. "People who see the world as it actually is," she said, "not as they're told it is." You should have said no. You understand that now. But you'd spent months feeling like the only person in your own marriage who didn't know the whole story, and that feeling had become unbearable. So you said yes. The address was in the 13th, a building that looked like nothing. Bricked up windows on the ground floor, no buzzer, no sign. She knocked in a pattern. The door opened. Inside, a large room, low light, maybe 30 people. Quiet. Still. An unlikely mixture. A woman in a business suit, 2 men in their 20s in work clothes. An older couple, a university student with a canvas bag, all watching you arrive. Nobody spoke until Elise introduced you. And even then, what was said was minimal. A nod here, a name there, but you felt something in that room you hadn't felt in a long time, like you were being taken seriously. Over the following weeks you kept going back, Wednesdays and Saturdays. Always late, always somewhere different, a basement in Belleville, a rented back room in Montmartre, once a building near the Périphérique that smelled like concrete and machine oil. They talked about things that seemed abstract at first, systems of control, hidden structures, the gap between what institutions claimed to be and what they actually did. Some of it sounded like conspiracy. Some of it sounded uncomfortably, like things you'd half thought yourself at 3 a.m. in foreign hotel rooms, somewhere between jet lag and honesty. You didn't agree with all of it, but you kept coming back, and slowly you understood why Elise had been disappearing. She hadn't been betraying you. She'd been preparing you. The task started small. Drive a car from one address to another, leave the key, walk away. You did it. Hands steady, mind loud. Then, deliver a package to an apartment in the 9th. Ring the bell. Leave it with whoever answers, don't give your name. Then, hold a phone for 48 hours. If it rings, answer. Say one word. Confirmed. Then remove the SIM card and drop it in the Seine. It rang once. You said the word. You dropped the card off the Pont Marie on a Tuesday afternoon, with tourists taking photos 10 meters away. Each task felt like a door. Every time you walked through one, another appeared, and on the other side of each door was money. Cash. Left in envelopes, in places Elise directed you to, in amounts carefully below anything that would prompt a question. You'd quit your job by then. You told yourself it was temporary. You told yourself a lot of things. Your best friend came from London in the spring. Dinner in the Marais. Steak, wine. The kind of meal that was supposed to feel like old times. By the second glass he put his fork down and looked at you. "Something's wrong with you," he said, not cruelly, directly. "I'm fine. You're not. You look like someone who's forgotten who they are." You laughed it off, changed the subject, ordered dessert you didn't want. On the metro home you thought about the last time you'd called your mother. 3 weeks ago. Maybe 4. You'd missed your sister's birthday. Not forgotten. You'd had a task that weekend and you'd actively chosen not to go. You hadn't even registered that choice as strange at the time. You registered it now. The apartment had blackout curtains Elise had installed herself. Your old phone was in a drawer. Compromised, she'd said, giving you a new one. You used that new phone for everything now. Of course you did. That night you lay awake while she slept. You took your old phone out of the drawer. Battery dead. You charged it, waited. When it came on, the notifications loaded slowly. Missed calls, messages. Your mother's name 3 times, your sister, your best friend. People from your old life, reaching through a screen to a version of you that had stopped picking up. You read them all. Then you put the phone face down on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. And for the first time since Lyon, since the café, since the book with no title, you let yourself ask the question you'd been refusing to ask. What has she made me into? You started investigating quietly, not dramatically. You were inside this thing. You'd learned how these people operated. You knew not to search, not to write things down, not to change your behavior suddenly. You watched. You listened. You remembered. A name overheard at a meeting. An address in a document left open on a laptop for 30 seconds. You photographed it with your phone without looking at the screen, just aimed and pressed. A reference to a larger organization, city unnamed, that the Lyon Group reported to. You pieced it together over 3 weeks. What they'd told you was philosophy was infrastructure. They moved money across borders, through layered fronts, through people who believed they were part of something meaningful. People like you, and whose participation created just enough distance to make the paper trail clean. The packages you'd delivered, the phone, the car. Not tests, operations. And you were, on paper, on actual, legal, discoverable paper, a participant. Not a witness, not a victim, a participant. You sat with that for a long time. Then you thought about Lyon, the rainy Wednesday, the café, the seat by the window, the book with no title. You thought about how specific it all was, and you thought about something Elise had told you once, casually, early on, that she sometimes came to that café to read when she wanted quiet, her usual spot, her usual table. But when you'd walked in that day, she'd been at the window table, not where she usually sat, waiting. You made a plan. You didn't tell anyone. You didn't write a single word down. Over 4 weeks you moved money, small amounts, irregular timing, to an account they had no connection to, in a bank in a country neither of you had discussed. You planted a reason to travel. Your mother's health. You mentioned it to Elise 10 days before you intended to leave. She's been struggling, I should visit, and let it sit there, unremarkable, a husband's ordinary concern. The night before your flight, you lay in bed and looked at the ceiling and tried to locate, somewhere in the previous 2 years, a moment that had been simply real, just you and her, no architecture around it, no purpose. You found one. A Sunday morning in Lyon, before any of it. She'd made coffee. You'd sat on the floor against the radiator because there weren't enough chairs yet. She'd sat beside you. You'd talked about nothing. A film, a song, whether Lyon was better than Paris, the correct way to eat a croissant. She'd laughed at something you said. Genuine, unguarded, a half-second before she could compose herself. You held on to that. You weren't sure if it proved she'd felt something real, but it was the only thing you had. You left at 6 a.m. She was asleep. Or still, you didn't kiss her. You didn't look at her for long. You picked up your bag, packed 3 days ago, a little at a time so it wouldn't be obvious, and you walked out, down the narrow staircase, through the heavy door, out onto the street. Cold morning, no one around. Your footsteps loud on the pavement. You walked to the metro. At the airport you changed your route twice without reason. Old habit. Something they'd taught you. The irony of that wasn't lost on you. Through security. Into the terminal. A coffee you didn't taste. When the gate opened, you felt something physically loosen in your chest. A tension so constant you'd stopped registering it as tension. Just the baseline of your body for the past year. You boarded, found your seat, closed your eyes. Your phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message. 3 words. Safe travels, chérie. You looked at it for a long time. Then you put the phone in your pocket and looked out the window at the grey Paris morning as the plane began to move. You didn't know if you'd escaped. You didn't know if they'd simply decided you were no longer useful. You weren't sure there was a difference. The plane lifted. Below you, Paris shrank. The river, the rooftops, the streets you'd learned to navigate like a local, the cafes, the bridges, the arrondissements she'd walked through at 2 a.m. while you lay awake and counted the minutes. All of it getting smaller. All of it still there. You closed your eyes and you thought about a rainy Wednesday in Lyon, a café, an empty seat. You thought about how different everything would be, how completely different your life would be if you had simply sat somewhere else.